All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, the most important thing about the DNC and the RNC is not likely actually to be their direct electoral impact. In as weird and horrifying and chaotic a year as 2020, what happened mere days ago is a way of feeling almost instantly like a distant memory. No. These conventions are more interesting for what they say about the strategy of the two major political parties and the direction that their leaders want to take them in. Now, a lot of this comes down to coalition, something we talk about a lot on this show. Who are you trying to win over? Who are you trying to excite? Who have you given up on, and who do you take for granted? At the DNC, a very clear picture was painted. Democrats are all in on their multi-decade obsession, winning over the moderate Republican. No matter that this long project has very clearly failed by literally every metric, there is less ticket splitting now than ever before, with partisans more entrenched in their own camps. And in fact, Joe Biden, the very candidate we were confidently assured could win over these theoretical moderate Republican voters, is doing worse right now with Republicans than his boss Barack Obama, and is even doing worse right now with Republican voters than one Hillary Clinton. Nevertheless, don't you worry, they will persist because it's more important to them to own the left than to beat Trump. Now, the RNC has been equally clarifying in terms of the potential future direction of the Republican Party, because we now know exactly what Trumpism on economics has come to mean. It's this.
What was happening prior to President Trump, you had businesses that were overregulated, not a friendly environment at all to start a company.
My family stopped ranching about 7 years ago. The regulations became so overbearing that the ranch was slowly sold off.
I lost businesses because of this regulation.
The factories in our town closed. The businesses in our towns have shut. It got to the point finally that middle America needed help. President Trump came in and was able to shed light on an area that had been so long left behind. Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was huge, especially for a community like ours that has a lot of small businesses, manufacturing, deregulation, fair trade, real life policy changes that affected real Americans.
So basically, after a massive upending of political convention and Republican orthodoxy and what has been heralded as some major realignment of the GOP around the working class, what we've ended up with after 4 years is this: a new working class sheen on the same old zombie Reagan ideology of tax cuts and deregulation. Ranchers, factory workers, and steel workers all coming together to praise school vouchers, deregulation, and Trump's big tax cut. Hey, Justin Amash, guess what, buddy? It's safe to go home to the GOP. Their disastrous Chamber of Commerce ideology is completely unscathed. Now, lest you think I'm being unfair here, I asked Trump campaign spokesman Mark Lauder here yesterday on this show, what is the economic plan to meet the moment of right now, massive job losses and economic pain? Here's what he had to say. What is the economic agenda to get people back to work and make sure they can stay in their homes and be able to provide food for their families?
Well, we're seeing tremendous growth in the economy right now. Obviously, more than 9.3 million jobs created in just the last 3 months. In fact, nearly half of the jobs that were lost because of the coronavirus have already been recovered. But the president wants to continue to do more. It's why he's talking about, in his second term, creating 10 million new jobs in 10 months, bringing 1 million new small businesses online. And that's just by continuing the tax cuts and deregulatory policies that the president has been enacting since day one.
Tax cuts and deregulation. Or you could look at who has gotten the plum speaking spots in the lineup. People like Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, Dan Crenshaw, Lee Stefanik, Kristi Noem, on and on and on, who have absolutely nothing unusual or heterodox to say on economics whatsoever. They'd be just as comfortable at a Jeb or a Mitt or a Paul Ryan convention as at a Trump convention. They'd actually be more comfortable there. Basically, you've taken Mitt's convention, dressed it up with a few more workers, and added a layer of fawning fealty to the dear leader. Now, the one area where I do want to say there is still a trace of divergence from orthodoxy is on trade. But it's mostly been an afterthought this time around. Makes sense, given that the so-called America First president couldn't even bring himself to sign an executive order bringing critical medical supply lines back from China because he was worried about upsetting the apple cart with his new buddy Xi Jinping. And it's not just the convention. Signs are all around that Trump himself has laid the groundwork for the GOP to snap right back to the party of old, maybe with some new nifty populist language. He's listening to the same old voices on economics. Kudlow, clearly ascendant with his payroll tax and capital gains tax cut obsessions. The more heterodox thinking Peter Navarro appears to have been completely sidelined. I mean, just look at the fact that Kudlow got the prime speaking slot and Navarro is nowhere to be found. And in terms of building power for an agenda, Trump has not used any of his considerable sway with the electorate to back candidates who might share that original Trumpian rhetoric, instead going to whoever puts on the most overtly disgusting displays of loyalty. Surprise, surprise, the corporate politicians are incredibly skilled ass kissers. Now, in the end, Trumpism on economics has just basically come to mean the same old with a populist branding update. So if the Democrats are trying to win the hearts and minds of suburban white-collar America, what audience does this Chamber of Commerce populism actually seek to draw? Well, interestingly, it seems like they're trying to win back some of those suburban moderates that the Democrats have also been completely obsessed with. I guess that's what Trump was trying in his embarrassingly awkward way to signal with his suburban Housewives of America tweets. After all, if there is a central theme of this convention, it's basically Donald Trump is not a racist, with the secondary theme being Donald Trump is not a sexist. That is messaging aimed squarely at assuaging the concerns of the suburban voter. That's been abundantly clear in their decision to go all in on identity politics and choices like the montage of women in the White House and the one on the suffrage movement and the naturalization ceremony of immigrants from all over the world. Even the policy choices seem to be aimed at this suburban demographic. This time around, the Muslim ban has been swapped out for the First Step Act. Instead of Angel Mom's warning of undocumented immigrant crime, we've got the McCloskeys warning of mobs breaching your gated community. And no sign of the promises of healthcare infrastructure and protection of Social Security that allowed Trump to break the mold to start with. In other words, rather than betting on actually bringing more of those forgotten men and women into the electorate, they've just decided to try to reclaim the old coalition that has been slipping away from them. And you never know, it could work. But it's certainly not the bill of goods that was sold back in 2016. And so in the wildest year of my life, we've ended up in perhaps the most unexpected place of all, two utterly conventional parties fighting for the chance to maintain the status quo. We think a lot about coalitions here, and as I've been watching this, I'm like, who is this aimed towards? And in some ways, the messaging has been kind of all over the place. But the central themes really seem to be aimed at suburban America. They seem to have given up on the original political theory of change, which is that we can expand the electorate. We can bring in new people by focusing on issues that other people weren't talking about before. And look, we talk here all the time. It's no surprise to us that what the rhetoric was and what the substance has been is completely different. But this time the theory seems to be, no, let's try to win back some of those moderate suburbanites that the Democrats are trying so passionately to win. And also on the merits, look, I don't think those voters are winnable anymore. I agree with you. I think about the suburban housewives of America that I know, and they are the most done with Donald Trump. So I don't think the politics of it work, and I think it has a lot of broader implications for where the GOP goes.
It's fighting a losing war. And what it really is chauvinism. It's, these people, where are they going to go? They're going to go to the Democrats, right? That's really what they think. They take them for granted. And guess what? They're going to let them know if their turnout rate is not what it was in 2016 by the millions. Screwed up, huh? Because could have shored up the vote with actually focusing on the people who went to bat for you, came out of the woodwork, hadn't voted since 1980 to come and vote for you, all while trying to win over these suburban housewives of America, right? Many of whom are actively do not want the same economic agenda that these working class men and women do. I don't know why we have to play a tug of war. How did these suburban, upper middle class people become the most powerful people in America? The system's not supposed to work for them. The system's supposed to act. What does actually middle class people in this country even mean anymore? I mean, the bifurcation of that, of course, has become insane.
Completely hollowed out. Real
middle class people are suffering, and they are getting not spoken to. Like you said, Larry gets to speak. Peter Navarro doesn't get to speak. Okay, we see what this is. I think it's a clown show. And aesthetically, it could work. I really do think it could work just because the DNC was so bad and Joe Biden's candidacy is so rudderless. But yeah, I mean, on the whole, millions of people out there who believed in the message are not being served. And somehow these upper middle class suburbanites have become the people that we're all like, oh, we have to win them back. I'm like, let them go. Fine. I just read a story that the Chamber of Commerce, for the first time in its history, is endorsing Democrats. That 100 John McCain staffers and several Mitt Romney staffers are endorsing Biden. I'm like, this is good. I want them to go. Expel them from the coalition. Ensure that they never have power, because they're clearly so powerful in the media and elsewhere. This is a good thing. And yet, the chief aim of the GOP is right now is to be like, no, guys, don't go anywhere. Like, we're actually okay. We believe in deregulation.
Yeah.
Still, that's not what we, and look, deregulation is not a bad thing in and of itself. I'm more just like, when it becomes an end, the only end that you work to maximize at all costs, regardless of thought, then it's idiotic. Well, and that's the thing that really gets me.
I kind of hate the deregulation conversation because, of course, some regulations go over the top. Yeah. Of course, some are needed for health and safety. Go to countries that don't have them and find out. So just like deregulation as a thing, it's kind of silly and lacks nuance. But to your point, look, why did Trump expand the electorate last time around? Why did he bring out new people, and why did he get people who had been longtime Democrats to switch over? It's because he told the truth about the economy. He told the truth about the fact that you had these top-line numbers that were good, and then Obama's out there, oh, the recovery is so strong, and Hillary's saying we're going to continue the Obama economy. And he was willing to say no. Right? American carnage. People melted down in his inauguration speech about that.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, if you live in that part of the country, and I have lived in that part of the country, it lands because you see the rotting hulk of what your town used to be. You see the rotting hulk of what the middle class dream used to be for you. That messaging would land now more than ever. And no, the Democrats, Biden, they aren't doing anything to speak to those people either. But they're not in charge.
No.
He's in charge.
I blame him.
He's left it completely on the table. And so, again, it matters with the Biden versus Bernie fight in the primary. We looked a lot at, like, what are the two different directions of the Democratic Party? What are the two different coalitions? Who are you trying to win back? Are you actually trying to rebuild a multiracial working class coalition? Biden has no interest in that. And what we've seen with Trump now is it's basically collapsed to we're going to have some more working class faces on the same old Chamber of Commerce.
The good news is that the war can still be fought. Nobody's won it yet.
Indeed. And it's very much up for grabs.
Next on Rising, viral video. It shows a reporter trying to save the life of someone shot in the head during riots in Kenosha, Wisconsin. He's a friend of mine. We're going to hear from Daily Caller reporter Richie McGinnis, who was on the ground when Rising returns.